Welcome back to the Diary of a CMO, the podcast where I sit with CMOs and thought leaders in marketing and related media, tech, and creative industries. We'll talk about how they got to where they are, strategies and life lessons we can learn from them to help build a career, business, and ultimately a life that we love. I hope you enjoy. Please subscribe. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Diary of a CMO. Today I have, oh my goodness, there's a lot to say. First about the guest that I have here with me today, but we have been trying to set up this episode for months now, and it's really exciting to finally be able to do this. Oh man, as though trying to figure out, our schedule wasn't enough and trying to make sure, time fits on both sides and everything. Then we set up the podcast for, I think this was last week. And then, the studio platform started to act up. Everything just seemed to be going wrong. Then we had to reschedule for today. And I'm just so excited to finally have with me, oh my goodness, the legend, the living legend himself, Alistair King. I am not even going to try to introduce him because I am very sure that no matter the amount of research I've done prior to this episode, it doesn't come close to the body of work and accomplishments and incredible milestones that this gentleman, has had over the years. I'm so excited about this. I'm strapped in, to really go the long haul with this episode. I'm super excited. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself at some point, but it's my honor, it's my privilege, it's my unique. I can go on because I'm so excited about this episode. I really am. I've admired this man from afar, as I'm sure every other young man, especially in our industry, has over the last decade plus 2 decades, at least for me, over the last 2 decades. And to now be here to be able to interview him, I don't take it lightly at all. I'm so grateful. I'm so honored to have with me on the episode today, the living legend himself, Alistair King.
Thank you, Tyler. That's very kind words.
Oh my goodness.
I'm still a young man myself, I need to add. But thank you. That's very kind of you to say.
Oh man. I must honestly, I cannot tell you how. And this is, how as a young person in the industry or in any industry, I assume, and then you research into people who have gone, ahead of you to try to find who would you like, who has done it the way that you kind of would like to do it, who is that person? And it's weird because I'm based in Nigeria, I have been based in Nigeria for the better part of my life. And to then be able to spot this company called King James, which was a fascinating name for me, for religious reasons. And, I just kind of really followed the story, was fascinated by your story, looked into the journey of the company, and then with the Accenture conversation, and then everything that just went on and on afterwards. I'm not going to preempt myself. Again, thank you very much for doing this. I deeply appreciate it. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, Al, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, you've done a good job so far. Thank you. I am Alistair King. I've done the full journey, I suppose. That's one way to introduce myself. I think that when you start out in a business like advertising, I'd say dare to dream or dare to imagine what the full journey would look like. And then you suddenly look up and you've kind of completed that journey. It is a great story because I'm not sure that anyone gets to tell that story of starting out from scratch and then building a company. King James actually started before the Bible was written, just so you know. So really been around a really long time. We were 24, 25 years old when we sold, which is a long journey for one company, as long as independent companies have ever gone. through the earn-out period, as you mentioned, with the sale to Accenture, through to its completion. So here I sit with 2 weeks officially on my contract with Accenture in an advisory role, and starting a new chapter. So it is a full circle moment. I know we battled to get the story to this meeting together, but actually the timing couldn't be better, actually. So yeah, it's really nice to be here to tell that story.
Amazing, amazing. And I think that for me is the essence of this episode. The essence of this episode is to be able to tell that story. Because in my mind, this is kind of what I envisage in my mind with this episode is, if someone was to try to research this person called Alistair King in this lifetime and in the next lifetime, that this episode will be one of the major resource that would, that would provide an almost exhaustible context of what that story really is. I don't think that we can do that in an hour or two, but we will try to do as much as we can. And I'm excited and I'm looking forward to it. So let's take it back to the beginning. What how do I ask this question? Can you share the story of your early career in advertising and what is your early days in advertising and what inspired you to co-found King James Group in 1998, right?
98, yes.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's a long, it's a convoluted story because it's not quite as simple as that. I mean, it took me a while to get to the point where I felt I could, I was equipped to run an agency and own, and run and deal with clients. And you kind of have to get to that point in your career where you feel confident, um, and that takes a while in its own right. I mean, if I go back a little bit just to set the scene, I mean, I almost wasn't in advertising. I was, I back in the day when I lived in Johannesburg, I sort of wanted to be a journalist, but I couldn't. We couldn't afford to send me to Rhodes University to be a journalist, which is what I am now. I'm a writer, but not in the same way. So I
Interesting.
registered for a BSc in genetics at Wits University, and I got accepted. So I was heading. I was heading literally in the weeks leading up to registration at Wits. I started having doubts about whether I was going to be a scientist in my life, and I love all things genetics. I mean, it fascinates me. It's creative in its own right. And back in the mid-'80s, it was a very fledgling career. And I thought this is how I'm going to spend my life. But on the day of registration, I was on my way there and I was sitting on the bus and thinking, am I a scientist? Am I a scientist? And I walked into the great hall at Wits. I saw all the banners, that were up where people were in queues registering. And on the far right was the science faculty, which was a blue banner. And I looked at the kids there, the youngsters there, and I thought, that's not my tribe. And then I looked to the left, and there was the red banner, which was all the commerce people. I went, that's definitely not my tribe. And I looked to the further left, and then there was the yellow banner, which was the arts faculty. And there were rows and rows of people lining up. And this one girl turned around and looked at me and smiled. She had the bluest eyes I've ever seen in my life. Her name was Francesca Sidnell. And I thought, that's my tribe right there. So I joined that queue. And just like that, I went from being a potential scientist to being ultimately on a path to advertising. And I ended up getting a BA in a bunch of things, English and psychology and sociology. But what is important is back in that day there were no ad schools. Ad agencies got their copywriters from universities, from an array of different courses, and they got their art directors from design and arts schools. so while I was at Wits, I kind of, this advertising thing caught my attention, and I thought, okay, this looks, I want to be a writer. That was kind of where I was always heading. And that's a kind of writing, I guess. So I started an advertising society called Ad Factor, which was my way of inviting the doyens of advertising to come and talk to our members. And that's actually how I kind of sort of set myself up for a career in advertising. I got a lot of experience from some very successful writers and strategists and very famous ad people. And so I kind of, that's how I ultimately sort of forged a path towards advertising. And a few years later, I joined a little agency called Barker McCormack, and about 6 months after that, I joined JWT. At that time, you don't really know how good you are. It's a weird thing about being a young person, is you kind of choose what you want to do, but you have no idea if you're good at it. You
Absolutely.
just hope that's what you want to spend your life doing.
Absolutely.
But I knew that I had a very fertile imagination. I knew I could spin a story and tell a good joke. And so I felt like I had the ingredients to kind of imagine advertising, and it looked like a really fun way to spend my life. And so I was about 22 years old when I got my first job. I had a wonderful creative director named Gordon Tor, who absolutely believed in me.
Wow.
I like to tell people that I'm actually, when you're young, you think you know stuff, but actually you really don't know much at all. And I certainly didn't know. I knew how to have ideas, but I had no idea whether those ideas were good or not. And Gordon he really gave me the ropes to just create advertising, and he liked everything I did, which was remarkable, because very few people get bosses like that.
Yeah.
So in the first 2 or 3 years of my career, I must have made 25, 30 TV ads, which is unheard of. I mean, it normally takes you a decade to get that kind of body under your work, that kind of work into your portfolio. They weren't great ads, to be fair. And so, I was still learning. I still couldn't identify what a good idea was, really. And I knew that in order to up the ante, I had to get into one of the top tier agencies, and that was an agency called Ogilvy and May, the Right Foot, Siltrip and Macon, which was, in my mind, the ultimate iconic South African agency. They did all the Volkswagen work, and the list is long. And I managed to get into there. I was Brian Siltrip's last hire before he retired.
Wow.
So
Wow.
thank you, Brian, for that gift to me.
Wow.
And I just flew in this agency. It was such a creatively ambitious, adventurous organization, and it lifted me in a way that I couldn't imagine, because I was surrounded by people much better than me, which is in itself a motivation. I think that
Yeah.
when you're writing work, and that work's being reviewed by the very best in the industry. Like the Burke brothers, Stephen Burke in particular, was an absolute legend of copywriting and radio writing in particular. And literally, the first ad I wrote for them won me my first award. The second ad, I think, won me my first Lurie. It was just like, once I knew what the bar was, I had to write 10 ads to get anything remotely close to that bar. So I still wasn't confident. I became a creative director at JWT when I was about 25, and then Ogilvy made me a creative director at 28. But then, when I knew that I was a creative director in one of the best agencies in the country, I had a sense that I could do this job. And and the awards were coming, and my confidence was growing, and I started to get a sense that I could talk to marketers, which was something. It's quite an important part of being a creative director. You think it's just about making ads. It's not. It's about persuading someone to run with that idea. It's about knowing that idea is going to have an effect on the brand, that it's going to be important out there to consumers. That takes a while, that doesn't come quickly. It's something that it's a slow bubbling under, that you slowly grow in confidence, and suddenly you look up and go, I can do this. I can have an agency, because when I speak, people listen, and when the stuff that I do seems to have an impact, and that's how I guess you get this convergence between your own skills, your own struggle to be a creative person, and trust in your abilities, and then have your ability to persuade clients that is the right thing for their brands. And that was, I guess, the catalyst for me to go, okay, now I think I can start my own agency. I was just under the age of 30 when I realized that, and I approached James Barty, who was a fellow. We became directors of Ogilvy at the same time, so we were kind of brothers in the agency, and very much equals in the organization. And he and James struck me as a very very well-rounded person. He struck me as someone who could help me persuade clients, because he had a maturity about him. And I also figured he could run an agency, run the business side of it, while I hopefully run the creative side of it well. And so that's how we kind of met over a cocktail one night and said, let's start King James.
Interesting. So I was going to ask you about in those early days of starting King James. What would you say are some of the really, I'd say maybe the toughest challenges you had in those early days of starting the agency, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Sure, yeah. That's a big question, and it's so weird. I was so confident with my abilities at that stage, and my portfolio was top to bottom award-winning work that I'd done at Ogilvy. And I figured, well, those were the credentials of King James in the beginning. Was this is the work I can do, and our agency is now called King James. And we lost in the first year 9 straight pitches, back to back. I mean, it was absolutely soul destroying. I mean, James and I used to look at each other and used to say, well, what's wrong with us? How can clients not see how good we're going to be? But of course, King James was unknown. It was unproven as a partnership. We were untested, and the work still entailed all my great work from Ogilvy. So it was, in essence, the credentials of my work at Ogilvy, and therefore didn't really represent King James. So we made a decision probably 2/3 of our way through our first year, and we were broken. I mean, I was so many weekends and late nights pitching, and all came to nothing. And so we said, let's stop, let's rebuild, let's stop pitching for starters. We had 2 or 3 small clients, good clients, but not large clients. So we thought, let's have 3 good pieces of work, because I've always maintained that's all you need is 3 good pieces of work, or that's a portfolio. Even as a junior copywriter, 3 pieces of work is enough to let someone know that you can do this job. So we took the 3 best pieces of work and we put it together in a thing. And it's like a promotion for a sunglass place. It was a single print ad for Cape Argus, and it was the beginnings of what was Bell's, became a 19-20-year client of ours, like a tactical ad for Valentine's Day. That was our portfolio. And I ditched everything I'd done in Ogilvy, and that's what we started to peddle, you see. And Then we won a couple of little pieces of client business, and we kept replacing as soon as we did a better piece of work, we replaced it with the piece that was weaker. And so it went. And 25 years later, bizarrely, I still think like that. We just need 3 pieces of work, except that 3 pieces of work now is 19 years of Alan Gray, that story. 15 years of Sunlum, that story. How we took Bells from there to there in 19 years. And so it still becomes about 3 pieces of work, except it becomes about 3 bodies of work, I guess, or 3 big impacts. It's no longer sort of about TV ads and radio spots and Christmas campaigns. And you just rotate that. So I always maintain a new business must always just focus on those three pieces of work and then be honest. Are they good? And if they're not good, you better them, because that's really the foundation of a business, is making sure that you're taking one step at a time and replacing one piece of work with another. There's no shortcuts. If the work's rubbish, you're just people talking about what you're going to do,
Wow.
as opposed to this is what we do. And
Wow.
so that was a very humbling experience in our first year. It's cut us down to size very quickly. And in fact, I can honestly say for the first 5 years, we were rather unspectacular. I mean, I think a lot of people were going, oh, they had so much promise. They looked like they were going to come out and impact, but we weren't.
Wow.
We were slowly
Wow.
building this caliber of work, and in a very quiet way, which I think is nice. And we weren't desperately trying to push ourselves into the media. We weren't prepared to scam, we weren't prepared to do pro bono work in order to win awards. We weren't adopting sort of freebie clients in order to get some awards under our belts. We were just very methodical and committed to the clients we had, and then building our portfolio that way.
You lost. King James lost the first 9 pitches back to back.
Yep.
It's
soul destroying.
It's so remarkable, and I like when we have these kinds of conversations, because I must be honest with you, even like a younger version of me looking at someone like you and what you guys have done with King James, in my mind is, oh man, you never imagine, like, there was a time when this same company, will go on such a losing streak. That's remarkable.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. I think that one of the reasons I like those kind of stories is that it really gives the audience sort of a, the full spectrum of what the experience and the journey has been like. I wanted to ask you as well about, there seemed to be a certain type of culture, and maybe I call it a creative philosophy, that King James is known for today. How did you cultivate that?
Yeah, I've always battled with this question because it wasn't intentional. We didn't write down culture. We didn't even think about the kind of agency we wanted to be. We were just, I think what's important is that when we started King James, I figured that was the high moment of my life. I didn't actually have to achieve anything else in my life. I felt I'd reached the pinnacle, and that after that, I didn't have any ambitions to build the best agency or the biggest or the credibly the most accomplished. I just wanted to have my own place in which we would have fun. So I think first and foremost, that's what we did. It wasn't written for anyone else's benefit. I just wanted to have fun with my business partner, and we wanted to make cool ads. And I think that's seeped into the company. I think that people knew that we were there to make great advertising above all else. And so James and I, we never had a single meeting where we talked about money, ever. We didn't talk about goals, business ambitions. We didn't set financial goals for ourselves ever. It was always about how do we make the best advertising for the clients in the category they're in. Because I think that's the building blocks of any business, is that if you working in a whiskey category or financial services category or banking category, the best way to start is to look at the best work in the category and beat that. Because as long as you're doing that, the client always has the best work in the category. They're going to dinner parties and people are going, I really love that work you did. And so the best way to grow an agency is to make sure that you're at the sort of the front end of that business. My philosophy is that the work precedes everything. That I'm terrible at managing people. I'm very good at managing work because I feel that if you concentrate on the work and the work is amazing, no matter how brutal the process, no matter how bruised and bashed the creative people are in the process of creating great work, when there's something awesome to show for it at the end, that is the most elevating thing you can have. Nothing else matters. When the work is
Absolutely.
good, nothing else matters.
Absolutely.
Even the financials become incidental when you're all proud of the work that you're doing. So I think that our culture first and foremost prioritized the work we were doing on our clients, and celebrating that work and having it's a bit like a play school. That was my experience of King James. It was a lot of mischief, a lot of naughtiness, mayhem. Um, it was like a comedy show every single day, and I think that translated into attracting really colorful people, um, really bright, ambitious people who wanted first and foremost to have have great ads in their portfolio. Um, I think people were a little afraid to come to us if they didn't have that burning desire within themselves, and you know that's all we drove. Yeah, that's all we drove. I think, and it's the same for our clients. By the way, I think that we attracted clients who wanted to be famous themselves rather than just um, tick over and keep the brand from failing. I think we attracted very um, ambitious clients.
Interesting. When you talk about James, and when so obviously, as we've been talking, you've mentioned his name, you've mentioned his name a couple of times. I can't help but wonder, you know, I mean, I've had my experience with, business partnerships, and I'm sure people listening also have. I guess I would like to know from you, what do you think made your, collaboration or partnership? What do you think has made it work, made it effective, between you and James? I mean, it's been, whoa, like decades. Like, how have you been able to, how has that partnership survived the test of time? And, what would you say are some of the ways you complement each other?
I mean, it's when you start out, it's a leap of faith. I mean, let me say that no one, human beings by their very nature are. There's no guarantee that the partners you choose in life, whether it's romantic or business or even friendship, there's no guarantee that lasts. Let's just kind of be honest about that. So you do take a leap of faith. I mean, I had a very strong sense from the beginning that James and I there would be no power struggle. I think that's important because a lot of agencies have been unraveled by their internal politics. Who's more important in the agency, who's the lead, who's the decision maker. I think James and I were a partnership of equals right from the beginning. I mean, we made really. It sounds silly, but it was important because it set the tone for our partnership. We said we'll always earn the same as each other. We will always have exactly the same equity in whatever we do together. We're never going to try. One person's never going to feel more important than the other because we're a partnership. Now, that sounds obvious in business, but I can tell you how often agencies have been derailed because one person starts to feel more powerful or more important or more valuable to the business than the others. And so we never ever had a power struggle. We respected each other's roles in the company with absolute faith in each other. And I think that is the foundation of 25 years of not just business partnership, but friendship as well. I mean, we have, we as we gain momentum as a company, we really started to be proud of what we were building and proud of the impact we were having and proud of the agency and the environment we were in because we did it. And so our relationship only strengthened over time. And still remains an incredible friendship and partnership even now as we are.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I know very just a handful of these kinds of partnerships that really, last this long, and I think that you couldn't have been more honest when you said it's a leap of faith in the beginning. Like you there are no guarantees. You never know how it is going to turn out. You just hope and have faith that it turns out the way you imagined that it would. And I think
Now,
that go on, please,
do you
go
know
on.
what is underestimated? Sorry, apologies. What is underestimated is that it's an incredibly stressful um, thing to be in business because it tests your relationship with each other, because it's not all it's not all joyful and rosy the whole way. There are real moments where you're under personal stress, the company's under stress, and it's easy to start blaming each other, or start questioning each other, or questioning what the chemistry you have with each other, like that first year of pitching. Um, but I think once you get through that and you realize that actually stuff happens, it's out of your control. That's actually not about you as a group, as a partnership, or even as a company. Um, you roll with stuff, you roll with the punches, and that's what deepens, I guess, your strength and your partnership with each other.
All right, let's try to move up the tempo a little bit. You had some other entrepreneurial endeavors in different creative spaces or otherwise. Can you talk to me about that? I'm particularly interested in the music one, but you could talk about the other ones as well.
Yeah, I got a little disgruntled with the ad industry and the awards industry in particular, and I just got into my brain that I didn't want to be measured by the award system. I felt like that there was more to life than actually trying to score points in an awards table. And so I just happened to have a very colorful group of friends, many of them musicians. It started off with an artist named Arne Carstens, who he and I were, oddly enough, um, we broke up with our respective spouses at the same time. My first wife, I'd just broken up with my first wife. He had just broken up with the Springbok Nude Girls, which was his band, and we found ourselves two bachelors on the strip in Cape Town. And so he and I became best friends, and I saw an opportunity. He was writing this music. I loved the music. It wasn't like his previous band, the Springbok Nude Girls. So I proposed to him that myself and a friend that I had, we co-fund an album, his first solo album, which led to an album called now I've gone blank. It's so ridiculous. Not Hello Goodbye Boys. It's it actually became it made us a lot of money. Let's put it that way. And made him a lot of money.
Interesting.
It went sort of, I think, double, triple platinum.
Wow.
Volkswagen ended up buying the soundtrack. Another Universe. Sorry, really bad moment there. Another Universe. And that money, which we had started this little operation called Play-Doh, which was literally money to play with. It was money we had, pocket money we had
Really?
to
That's where the name came
yeah, well,
from.
it was just a little bit of cash for a studio album. That Play-Doh, correct. It was money to play with. And that actually rolled and rolled. We didn't take the money out. We just kept rolling it. We made other albums, and we ended up making sort of 12, 15 albums with different artists, until eventually the record industry became so challenging. It's so difficult. Streaming was coming in. It actually became a really risky enterprise. And at that point, I said, I'm gonna bow out gracefully, having not lost any money and having not made any money. It's a good time for me to get out of the business. But I liked the idea. I felt that as a creative person, having my emotional eggs in different baskets was a good idea, because like when you're so totally invested in advertising, that my mood was completely linked to every day. If a client was gave us a hard time, I was depressed. If a client was ecstatic, I was ecstatic. It was like a roller coaster. But the moment I had these other projects on the side, I was able to I guess gain some perspective in life. And so it sort of carried on. We bought a magazine called One Small Seed, which we pulled into King James. We ran a pop culture magazine for, I think, 2 or 3 years. James and I ventured into a couple of, with some successful, some less successful beehive companies and book publishing companies. And they were all just dalliances, I guess, so that I didn't have to sort of measure myself by advertising alone. I suppose what is important is that this wasn't unique, because King James was in itself a product. King James Group was a product of startups. We started with the ad agency, then we literally in 1998 we started a design company called RSVP. Then we started a web development company in 98, which was right at the front of web development. Then PR, then experiential. We built companies as we went, so we were in already a smorgasbord of multidisciplinary companies all under one roof, which made it, speaking to the culture of the company, it made it an incredibly colorful place with different minds, different levels of energy. And I think that was the essence of the King James culture. It was just a fruit salad of fun and intelligence, So yeah, that was my dalliances.
Interesting. You touched on awards, and trying not to allow that sort of direct the kind of work that you do or something like that. I was gonna ask you about that, but just before that, we're not getting into our creative industry, ad industry conversations now. You've emphasized this sort of philosophy, that I think you have tagged medium neutral creative thinking. For those of us who are not, who haven't had the opportunity to experience that firsthand, in terms of learning what that is, what is that, and how has that approach sort of shaped the work you've done over the years?
Yeah, I mean, it's defining. It's not like we set out to be a medium, a channel neutral organization. We just started different companies and different divisions, which gave us the skills to do PR, to do social media, to do digital, they were almost separate companies. But as the digital era sort of barreled forward, we found ourselves actually very well positioned to put everyone together into one room and go solve this without a channel mind. And to be honest, I mean, clients were the most resistant, because they quite liked the routine of saying, we would like you to make a TV ad,
right,
or we'd like you to make a billboard, and then we'd like you to do a PR campaign. And in fact, clients are often more siloed than agencies are. Certainly today they are. So there would be one person who was in charge of PR, and they had a relationship with the PR people, and one person who was in charge of digital, and they had a relationship with their digital agency. So it was very siloed. But we started to say to our clients, I know you've asked for a TV ad, but actually what you really need is this. And it's a digital campaign. It's going to play out in a digital platform. We're going to use social media to spread it. We're going to use PR. We're going to go to the media. We're going to make sure that the news readers are talking about it. We're going to make sure it's featuring in magazines. So we started to sort of force our people together, which forced the creative product to change, and that forced the clients to change, because they started to, I guess, expect us to question the brief. And you don't always question the brief at the time of the brief, but you can question the brief in the solution that you put on the table. So you would walk into the meeting, you say, we know you asked for a billboard. Here's your billboard. And they go, that's a very nice billboard. You said, yes, but there's actually a much better way to do this. It happens to be digital
Right.
content film that does this and it does this and does this and does this and it's going to cost you 10 times more, but imagine the impact. And clients can't unsee that, they can't unsee a good idea when they see it. They kind of go, oh, this is very inconvenient because I just wanted a billboard, but now you've gone and given me something I really like, and now I have to think about it.
Interesting.
And that was actually when King James started to do it's really its best work, because we were still able to do a good TV ad when we needed to. We were still able to do a good PR exercise when we needed to. But this work was emerging, which didn't look like other work. It was sort of, if I start sort of mentioning pieces of work that started to change the narrative with our clients, like One Rand Man for Sanlam became like no one had ever done that kind of a thing before. And then the following year, the client wanted something like that. It was a sort of a way of growing the client's appetite for work that was unpredictable and not off-piste work became sort of our signature, I guess.
Wow. Well, I like the approach of you wanted a billboard. This is the billboard. Oh, that looks great. But actually, you don't
Mm.
need a billboard. This is what you need. I actually really like that.
Yeah.
Are there some other thoughts, some other critical thoughts that you apply to the work that you do? Some sort of I don't want to call it a secret recipe, but some sort of a playbook that you apply to the work that you do. Like, are there some other critical thoughts you can share?
Yeah, I hate these kinds of questions because I wish there was a clean formula to how to do this job. And I mean, creativity is a very muddy, murky, challenging thing, and I don't have a formula. I mean, I think I have a sensibility which has evolved over time. I did want to mention one thing. I mean, when I started out in advertising, there was a guy named John Smedel who was a wonderful copywriter, and I remember he said to me, he said, "There's not a single brief that lands on my desk that doesn't scare the hell out of me." And I remember thinking, wow, okay, because I'm terrified every time a brief lands. As a young creative, I was terrified because I thought, how am I going to crack this?
Wow.
And he gave me the realization that actually it's much harder than it looks. No matter how good you are, it's still terrifying because you still have to have an idea. And I think that fear is a good thing, because I think that it forced me to never feel like I'd solved it. So I kind of over solutioned everything. If there was a radio ad, I wrote 10 ads,
Mm,
like 10 complete
mm.
ads, to get one that was as good as good as I'd want it to be. Um, and and I think that that work ethic and working as many hours as possible, using every minute of the day and as late as you needed to be, was part of was my source, I guess, was that I was never comfortable with what I was presenting, which I was always very insecure about whether it was good enough. And I still feel like that, actually. I always feel like there's always a better idea out there. Even as I walk in to present it to the client, I'm thinking, shit, have we solved this? Is this the right one? And now I've got to fight for this piece of work. So I think that's part of the fabric of my sort of insecurity and how I make ads. I think King James, I was very conscious that I wanted our work to be intelligent. I think that there's so much mindless dross out in the media. Like, it's just it doesn't it has no soul. There's no emotion to it. It's puerile. I really I say that because I feel that that sort of meant that we as a company were looking for work that was smart, treated consumers as if they were intelligent people rather than just um, people reacting to suggestions or nudges. Um, I wanted to build work that had depth to it and emotional value, and I think that became a signature of King James. I think my creatives knew that there was pointless putting something to me that didn't have those ingredients baked in. Otherwise, I wasn't going to buy it. I was always going to say, go and think further, man. Find something that's got some more uniqueness to it. And I do think that if you brutal with your decision making, you know whether the ideas you're putting on the table are really unique or not. And I feel like eventually we make a lot of work that's not unique because we run out of time. Maybe
Right.
the client doesn't
Right.
want something a bit safer. Maybe we didn't have the budget to do something magical with it. So, it's horses for courses. You've got to solve the brief in front of you in the circumstances that you have, in the time that you're given, with the money that you've got. Um, those practical realities of being a creative person are there. But I always feel like there's something astonishing you can do with every brief. I mean, I literally, my team will tell you how frustrating it is, because if there's a wobbler, a brief for a wobbler in the agency, I want it to be the greatest wobbler that's ever been done in the history of wobblers, or buntings, or I like that need to say you can win an award. You can win a Grand Prix at Cannes with a TV ad, but you can also win a Grand Prix at Cannes with a tiny little thing that appears in an in-store retail place. Like, you can do great work on every single brief, as long as you believe that. If you just think, oh, I'm going to get this out of the way, and wait for a brief that has awards written all over it, you're never going to
Yeah.
you're never going to push the parameters of that brief.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I like that you kind of you've kind of moved into the awards conversation. What are your concerns about, the focus of the industry or an agency on award-winning work? What are your concerns?
Well, I love winning awards. It's a fact. Um, but it's how you win an award that's very crucial for me. It's in fact, I think that if you do a great piece of work, and you if you it's worth putting into an award show, and if it really is a unique piece of work, then it deserves to be awarded, not just the agency but the client plus the creative people. Um, I started to, I guess, become skeptical of the award system when I realized that actually the advertising industry was not getting better. The work was not getting better, but there was more and more awards being won. And I blamed at the time, and I still do, the point system. And the point system really assigns points to every award that you win. So the end game becomes not a great piece of work that you've fought over and crafted with your client and persuaded them to run with. It becomes, um, how can I win an award? That becomes the goal. So, agencies I believed were not pushing their clients. The work on TV was not getting better, but they were scoring their points cheaply on the side with a little radio ad, and that they had funded themselves, and they'd snuck under the radar, and they were on stage being applauded as the best agencies in the country. And I was going, that's not right. That's not fair. That's not a representation of what's happening here. Because once you start pursuing awards and awards points, you stop trying to elevate the industry. And so I sort of it was a very conscious decision to say, we're not going to be an agency that pursues awards in that manner. We're going to do great work and put it into award shows. And if it wins, fantastic. We'll celebrate um, like there's no tomorrow. But if we're not going to lose sleep over the fact that a good piece of advertising for a client that we've worked hard for with the client, if it doesn't win an award, we'll be okay with that. And so I think we started to grow a reputation for being an agency, the real deal. We would much rather take an unknown client who'd never won an award and win an award with them than go and pursue clients that were known for awards. Uh, I always one of the moments that I remember was, I remember coming back from from the Lurries one year, and we had won a Grand Prix with Alan Gray for the second year in a row in film. And my client phoned me and said, "You won't believe this. My phone has been ringing off the hook." And I went, "Oh, why?" I went, "Agencies." So I said, "Oh, why?" He says, "No, they're all saying what a fantastic brand you've got, and if you ever want another agency, please consider us." And I thought to myself, firstly, why are you phoning a client that's just won a Grand Prix? Why don't you phone the client that's not featuring at the award show? That's a client you should pursue because they need better work. Why pursue the client that's already winning awards? And it's lazy. It's lazy. Agencies are
Wow.
incredibly lazy.
Wow.
They're not prepared to take an unknown client and do their first great ad and then do another great ad and then build them as a brand. They'd rather just get the cheap win. And that became like the foundation for my disillusionment with the industry. I feel like it corrupts the industry to a very high degree when you're pursuing awards for awards' sake. And I think it corrupts clients too, because the clients are sort of, they participate in it. So I think that the best industry that we could have is when the work is legitimately not created for award shows. It's legitimately flighted with big media spend behind it, and that for me is how an industry should gain respect, not cheaply in the wings of award shows.
Wow. Wow. I think I find it interesting, borderline repulsive, that an agency would call up a client that just won a Grand Prix, you know. And you are
Mm.
right. It's a cheap approach to try to um, win an award, and it's very instructive what you said. Why not call the guy that didn't even feature at the award at all and do great work for them so they can feature
Correct.
them?
Yeah.
Or why not call the guy that came
Yeah.
third or something? Or the guy that was, shortlisted but didn't win? Or like, I mean, let's see.
Or or better still, don't call. Do such great advertising yourself
Right.
until they call you. That for
Absolutely.
me was
Absolutely.
that kind of look. I'm not bitter about the way the industry is, because it's been a wonderful journey, and I think it's filled top to bottom with wonderful, talented people. But I think that the rivalries at award shows does corrupt the process a bit. I think it changes the goalpost. Um, it doesn't, and that's why I kind of removed myself from the awards process. I decided not to judge award shows. I stopped attending them. I found that it was messing with my head a bit, that I didn't want to be that guy that was
Got
now
it.
pursuing awards just
Yeah.
because my ego was hurt.
Yeah.
So I just thought, I'm just going to ignore it and carry on and make advertising in my agency, and 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 the awards will come, and they did, and
Yeah.
they did come. So I've got no gripes about how we did it.
What would you say? What would you say to a young agency? When I mean young, maybe 3, 4, 5 years in the game, that is considering award winning as a form of, brand building for the agency. What would you say to
Yeah,
that type of to a young agency?
I mean that is always the argument. I mean, small agencies will say, "How do I pop my nose? How do I become known if I'm not featuring at award shows?" Um, I suppose the assumption is that award shows are the only place that measures you as an agency, and that's the problem. I mean, I think that you know perhaps that's why King James took so long to get noticed. Was we weren't trying to compete. There were other agencies that were started at the same time as us, that were knocking the lights out at award shows on bookshops and motorbikes and you name it. But those agencies vanished quite quickly, because at the end of the day, marketers can distinguish between a serious agency and one that's kind of there for the glory. And I had faith in that. I had faith that the integrity of the agency would show if you just concentrate on the job at hand. If you really hold a client's hand and you solve them with a problem, they will tell other clients. Your name will grow the right way rather than sort of in the halo of award shows. And I think that proved to be true. I really think that we if I think back through King James, there was a process of I guess the industry started to recognize us, and it started with a brand called 2020. Alan Gray then came and said, "We like what you did with 2020," and Alan Gray we took beyond. Then Santam came and said, "We really like what you've done with Alan Gray. Can you do it with us?" And they said, "Sure." And then Sanlam said, "We really like what you've done with Santam and Alan Gray." And so reputation is built like that, slowly. There's an impatience in business because it's always like, now, I've got to do it now. I've got to, like the windows now. If I don't do it this year, we never had that urgency, which I think was a big factor. We weren't desperately trying to stamp our name into the industry because we were already thrilled that we had our own agency. It didn't feel like we had anything else to do. The fact that we slowly started to become recognized as a kind of a creative powerhouse of sorts, only then did I realize, actually, that's a good feeling I didn't know I needed. I didn't realize that would make me so happy to have the industry go, you guys are a quality outfit, and to hear that from clients. So I think that it depends on how. I think patience is critical. Substance, I would always rather choose to be an agency of substance, always, because I think that that's a bunch of qualities that requires hard work and commitment to, and can't be rushed. And what is the rush anyway? I mean, if you're a young creative agency, you've got nothing but time.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you very much. I have a lot of friends who run their own boutique, shops, creative agencies, and it's a conversation that we definitely have had in the past. And I thank you for giving your perspective on it. It's a very personal one for me for that reason. I have a quote here. We call ourselves benevolent dictators.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh man. Please, what are you postulating here? Like, what are you postulating here?
Firstly, I think that's James. I don't think I ever said that, but
Okay.
I don't disagree.
Okay.
I don't disagree. I think that when you run an agency, you need to be clear on what your company is about. You really do. You can't sort of. It's not a democratic place. I mean, it can have a feeling of a democracy in a sense that everyone has a voice. But actually, as a leader, you have to have a strong point of view of what your company is, and it has to be unwavering. Because we made sort of quite practical decisions. Like we're not going to tap dance. Pick up the phone the client, tell the client we've cocked up and we need to fix it, or don't pretend that it's a a great answer to a brief if you yourself know it's not a great answer. Ask for another 2 days. Some simple decisions which change the way the agency behaves. Like we're not going to scam. We're sorry, we're going to take the hard way. I guess a sense of who we are is what the leaders or the founders of a company should have, and I think that's what inspired the benevolent dictators. We still have a strong point of view, and our people knew that. They didn't question the choices we were making. They accepted it, and they stuck to. They helped us fulfill, I guess, a corporate ambition. But it is a strange phrase. I can't say I know exactly what it means either.
Okay, maybe when I have James in the future, I have him on. But I think that the essence of it, I think I understand the essence of it. It's an interesting approach, and I think it's more so a very critical one like you did say, in a creative space, also because
Yeah,
there's a bit of a subjectivity when it comes to the creative work that you do. Therefore, there's a need for, bulk stops here. This is the direction this thing is going, and stuff like that. I'll talk to James about
yeah.
it when I have him on the
So I
podcast for
mean,
sure.
to that point, I mean, you bring up I mean, maybe I'm more of a benevolent dictator than I'm implying, but one of the things I'm very aware of is that it's it is combative to go to a client and stand behind a piece of work that you believe in. It's, you can't go in gently and go, no. And the moment they question it, you go, okay, you've got to actually have a strong point of view, and you have to fight for that point of view, and you have to believe it. So don't fall on your sword for a piece of work that's average. Fall on your sword, go to battle when you're absolutely convinced that this will change the clients, the fortunes of that brand. And often we would share the work with people in the agency, and they would go, the client's not going to buy this. You go, why? They go, da, 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 and they list 8 things. And you say, it's not a skill to list 8 reasons what could go wrong. The skill is knowing when it's going to be right. Because, the client's going to list those same 8 things. The client's going to go, oh, but this, and you've got to fight for that work. And I suppose that does bring out the warrior in you. You do have to fall on your sword eventually, and clients will let you do that.
Yeah.
But you better be right,
Yeah.
because they won't let you do that again the
Yeah.
second time.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I was going to ask you a question about your, if you could, I mean, you've worked on some of the most iconic brands on the continent, and I was going to ask you what your top three works were. But I'm going to take a guess since we've been talking. I'm going to take a guess if you were even going to give me a top three in the first place. But I'm going to take a guess. I want to say Alan Gray because you've mentioned that a number of times. You've cited that a number of
Yeah.
times. I'm going to say Sanlam as well because you've cited that a number of times in this conversation. Am I on track or am I off track?
Tell me your third one, and then I'll tell you if you're right.
Okay. Uh, I don't think I have a third one. I only have two.
Okay. You are right. I mean, Alan Gray, is a 20-year relationship now. We did their first ad ever, and it's an extraordinary thing to be so twinned to a client for that period. I mean, in this day and age, a lot of business goes out to pitch every 4 years, as you know. It's mandated. Why they do that, I don't know. But this is a client that for 20 years we've done every ad except one, where we were on a break, for a 1 year break where they made one ad with another agency. But every other ad is us, and I'm incredibly proud of that. Right from the very first ad to the most recent ad. That's a credential that you can't replace, I think. So that is probably top of my list. Sanlam was extraordinary because they were one of those brands that was very conservative. They weren't known for doing great work, and we took them to the number one at Lurie's the very first year with that we had them, which was such a proud moment because they came from nowhere. They came out of the blue, really, as a marketing organization. They still are a client 14 years later. They're up there. It's hard, Chisha. So I think I've got a soft spot for Bells, which we had for 19 years, and Give That Man a Bells was the most extraordinary
Wow.
piece of creative because it actually wasn't even an advertising idea; it was actually a tech idea. And we went to them and we said, "This is a Give That Man a Bells. We've created this piece of tech, and you can literally give people bells whenever they've earned it." And we had this full campaign, and we had a sort of a little test thing on the phone, and the client went, "Oh, I really like that line. Can you just make an ad?"
Wow.
So we went, okay. So we made an ad, and then they went, "Oh, we really like that ad. Can you make another ad? Give That Man a bells." And it's suddenly got a life of its own. Suddenly people were using it in social media. It became a meme. Politicians, it was shouted out, blurted out in Parliament one day. It became this it had a life of its own, a social media life of its own. So I don't know how to describe an idea that started out as a piece of tech that became a piece of advertising that became a social meme.
Wow.
I love that. I love that kind of. It's out of your control, when
Yeah.
you have a good idea,
Yeah.
and I didn't write that line. One of my creative directors, Devin Kennedy, wrote that line, and it's a stroke of genius. I mean, it set that brand on a wonderful journey for a long time. So that would be my three, although sometimes in there, it's very closely in there. Certain pieces of work for Johnny Walker are in there, and certain pieces of work for Kalula, which we had for are in there. So I don't know. How do you
Okay.
choose?
I figured that for someone like you with the body of work that you have touched over the years, it'd be very difficult. But at least we narrowed down to about 6 or 7 based on the ones you've mentioned so far.
Although I can
Okay.
add to that I'm not sure there's a greater moment than the first radio ad I wrote that won me my first award, which was for
Ah,
Car Magazine. And, you know, like it's easy to pick sort of showcases of work and say that's sort of my proudest moment, but I'm not sure that anything will be as joyful as winning your first award with a 30-second. I still remember it. What would South African men prefer to find in their stockings this Christmas? The December issue of Car Magazine or a copy of Madonna's outrageously naughty new book? And then people go, Madonna's book, Madonna's book. Yeah, Madonna's book. He goes, well, there you have it. The December issue of Car Magazine didn't even come close to Madonna's book. But because it's banned in South Africa, neither will you. So get the December issue of Car Magazine instead. Then someone goes, but I did West. That was my first
are
award,
you serious?
and
You're literally reading out this script.
it's that's what I'm
Oh
saying.
man, that's incredible.
It's embedded in my head. I
That's
mean, and maybe
incredible.
that's my number one. I don't know.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Wow, that's incredible. When you look at, brands, and, I'm trying to use this to sort of round up this section of questions before I move on to the next one. When you look at brands, what makes a brand thrive? What makes a brand succeed? What makes a brand become, this beloved household name? What makes a brand work?
I really do, and it comes back to your question about what is your formula. I really feel deeply that 90% of most advertising is just invisible. It's all it's just wallpaper. It fills a space. It's there. It exists to fill the space, whether it's 30 seconds of TV or space on a page. It exists, and it says that the client exists. When brands get beyond that and they start to embed into those spaces things of real emotional value, real persuasion that speaks to your mind, speaks to your heart, and makes you feel something, it gets a dimension that you can't get from just a piece of advertising. It becomes something quite compelling, is the best way. And I think that brands that set out to do compelling pieces of communication are the brands that become deeply rooted in culture, and people react to it. You have to start out from the get-go acknowledging that to do that you've got to create a piece of advertising that's not like other advertising. It can't speak in the same way. It can't have the same language. It's got to have a unique point of view to the world. And all the brands that you can start listing great brands around the world, whether it's Nike and you name it. They all do that. They become meaningful to the customers. I'm a little, I remember in the my first year in advertising, I got invited to the cricket box of one of my agencies, and the camera was panning over the cricket stadium, and there were the brand, the clients had bought some postings around this, some spaces around the field, and every time they saw it on TV, they would like high five each other, and I was like, our brand's being seen, our brand's being seen. And I remember looking at it going, this is so mindless, because all you're doing is saying you exist. There's no emotional, there's nothing happening except the name of your brand being seen. In a weird way, and I made the choice at that stage was I didn't want to be that kind of an ad person. I wanted to find emotional weight and in the work that I'm involved in. I now feel like so much digital work is like that. You know, they're what I call farts in the ether. You know, people scroll through it and they don't look at it. It's just a shot of a car with a price or some line about how the car makes you feel. But it's registering somewhere. Someone's going, it's been seen by so many people. But you know how you're seeing it. You're scrolling past it in the same way that your eye would scroll past your name around a cricket stadium.
Right.
I feel like we're in that same phase now, whereas digital advertising has to go through this phase of finding the value that brands had when brands were built as brands. You know, digital is in the early days of exploring that and growing into that. And of course, there's wonderful. I'm not knocking digital because it's a great outlet for brands. And when you get it right, people fall in love with your brand. I mean, there's no reason why anyone should care about your brand. Why? I mean, it's just a product. It's a service. It's not a friend or a soulmate. It's just a brand. But somehow people do fall in love with brands, and they look forward to engaging with them in advertising, and they look forward to hearing what those brands have to say. That's a brand, you know.
Yeah. Wow. I think one of the key words that I picked from what you just said is meaning. Meaning, you know.
Yeah.
What's the meaning that the brand, you know, represents? What does it? How compelling is the story that we are trying to tell about this brand, and how different from what, you know, the audience would see, you know, whatever platform it is. Oh boy. I want to transition to, you know, the Accenture song, you know, part of your journey. And it'd be interesting to get your take on, to kind of hear you tell us, like, you know, clearly a very significant milestone, you know, for the King James Group. I wanted to ask you what motivated the decision at the time, and how do you think that it sort of transformed, you know, what you do, if it did, you know, and also what did that do for King James Group as an entity?
Yeah. I mean, look, at the time that we made the decision to sell the company, we were already a 24-year-old company, which is, I guess, uncharted territory for a company of our size. I mean, we were really a big agency with many, many hundreds of people in it, and that brings its own weight, I guess. You know, it takes its toll on you as a human being when you're carrying the burden of 380 jobs in its own right. But we were very much an agency that was looking for, you know, I think at some points when we were about 10 years old, we were getting approaches left, right, and center. Virtually every agency group was coming to us. And they were all coming to us with exactly the same offers. And we were not even remotely close to having fulfilled our own potential as an agency. So we wrote, I remember writing on our webpage that we were defiantly independent.
I saw that
cringe a little
phrase
bit.
actually.
I cringe. Yeah, I cringe a little bit when I think about it, because at that time we were very defiantly independent. We didn't want We didn't want another person coming to talk to us about because we didn't want to sell. It was that simple. We were set on not selling at that time, and those words stayed on our web page for another decade and a half until we were less defiantly independent. We had we had explored the option. Funny enough, we had actually looked as King James. We had looked at bringing consulting into our own organization because we felt that we were an agency constantly evolving anyway. We were evolving from an ad agency into this sort of this free flowing thinking organization, and actually we wanted to get more serious about the business aspect of what we're doing. So we were having conversations with individuals to come and join King James and bring consulting skills to us when Accenture called us. I think we were very intrigued by the idea that at that time that the South African operation was called Accenture Interactive. It was very small, maybe 40 people. We were intrigued by the fact that Accenture had been here for 50 years and had never made an acquisition. So we were essentially potentially their first acquisition. And they were buying around the world some of the best creative agencies. So they'd bought Droga 5, very famously bought Droga 5. David Droga was now sort of sitting at the helm of Accenture Interactive. They bought Shackleton, which is, I think, 4 times Cannes Agency of the Year in Spain. They bought the Monkeys, Rothko, Reba in Germany, Activision, which was the CGI company in Hamburg, who I'm currently working with. They did the Dragons in House of Dragons. So these were really exciting creative agencies around the world. And so we thought we're in good company here. That if we were going to change the way the agency was operating, we were really intrigued by the new frontier. What is the new frontier of advertising? And we felt it was much more in that space than it was in the agency space, the agency world. So it was a very compelling proposition from the beginning anyway. We didn't expect them to sort of erase the King James brand so quickly. David Droga sort of had a vision to create a new company called Accenture Song, which we accepted because it was part of a bigger vision of his, and it was tough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, when you've run your own agency and your name is on the door.
Yeah.
I underestimated how much King James was, how much of my own identity was attached to King James.
Right.
But having said that, I was also prepared for this eventuality that the name would disappear, would be erased, and that I would work for someone else for a period of time. And that was, I had mentally prepared for that prospect. I just didn't think it would happen quite as fast.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I mean, like, at the height of, King James. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, how did you cope with that, right? How did you cope with, this feeling that you didn't realize was going to be more pronounced than it actually felt at the time? How'd you cope with it?
Yeah, it was not well. I won't lie. It was, just I read this book about 10 years ago. A mate of mine who sold his companies sent me this book called, I think it's called Finish Big or Big Finish. And the opening paragraph says there are thousands of books written about starting companies, but hardly any books about finishing one. And that a lot of people sell their companies and then they become very depressed because they realize or they discover across many categories, they discover that the thing that they loved about working is now gone and all the money in the world doesn't replace that. And so you kind of have to decide quite early, and it's a process. You have to decide why do you do what you do? Is it for ego? Is it for fame? Are you trying to prove to your dad that you are that you've done something great? Is it for power? Is it for money? What motivates you? Because when you sell, that's gone. And you have to prepare your brain for that. And so I'd read this book, and I actually had sort of gone through a journey in my own mind of knowing that this day would come when the name would be gone. I expected it to be gone when I was gone, but it happened while I was still there, and that's fine. We accepted that, but it was an unexpected thing to deal with, and I think we handled it pretty well, actually, under the circumstances. I think we rolled with it. We embraced the new Accenture song, and that company continues to grow. We still got a lot of King James people are still in the organization, running the company much as they did. I mean, that's the weird part is James and I had, because we were growing so big, we were stepping back from the business to let our people run the place. So we were making ourselves redundant, because actually, if we stayed there like benevolent dictators, people would leave because they would have hit the ceiling and they would have gone.
Yeah.
So we made space for them to run the company, which is why the company actually doesn't need us to run. We are figureheads of sorts. We bring value to the clients, but the real workers are still in there running the
Right.
company and making creative decisions, and that is reassuring for us.
Interesting. What would you say was there any sort of challenge with integrating with the new partners, especially from a more tech driven entity versus good old creative
Yeah.
enterprise? What were the challenges in integrating that?
Yeah, I mean, look, King James, we were already working. We already were building platforms ourselves. We in a more boutique way, of course. We were not. We were tech minded ourselves. We were forging the whole agency was heading towards a digital way of being anyway, a digital first way of being. So that wasn't alien to us. I mean, I think that you know, no one can underestimate how difficult it is to bring two cultures together anyway. No, even if they seemingly seem like-minded, you still have different chemistry in play. So, there was, I guess, growth pains where you're having to, for the first time in your lives, think about other people's way of working and way of being. And Accenture is a very big organization. It's an American organization that has a way of being, and you can't really change that. You've got to fit in, and there's no way of fighting the system in that regard. So you have to grow up a bit very quickly, and then and accommodate
Yeah.
that way of being. And so, yeah, it's not really for me, to be honest. After this 3.5 years, I can say that, when you 25 years as an independent, you become quite stubborn. You're used to the way you want things to be. Your priorities are your priorities, and so it became apparent that actually the best thing for me was to actually take myself out of leadership, which is what I've done. I maintain a presence within the company. I work on some of their clients when asked to. I show up if I think I can add value to it. But I am, in essence, entering a brand new chapter as an independent creative at large of sorts. I don't know what that means. I think it just sounds better than I'm retired or semi-retired, which makes me feel even more lost,
Oh
or
my goodness.
old and more lost. Yeah.
All right, cool stuff. Cool stuff. I'm pretty confident that which is the beautiful thing about most journeys or new chapters is once you start, most of the time, everything just starts to unfold as you take a day at a time. You have a very faint idea or vague idea, of what you were trying to do over the next, year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But I think that, as you start on the journey, everything starts to, form and take shape, and things start to fall into the places that, they need to. Um, I was going to ask you, I think we had talked about, what I think you had referred to it as the greatest creative project of your life. Um, I think I'm just curious what that could be with a career like yours. Do you get what I mean? But before we get into that, I wanted to ask you, um, with everything that you have experienced and learned and on with your journey, if you were talking to someone, if you were advising someone who wanted to start an agency, because my question was actually framed as if you wanted to start an agency, and I thought to myself, nah, I'm just not looking to start an agency. So if you were advising someone who wants to start an agency today, um, how would you advise, especially from a business model standpoint? What will be your recommendation from a business model standpoint to someone who wants to start an agency today?
Okay, this is a surprisingly easy question for me to answer because I wouldn't have known my answer 6 months ago, but now
Interesting.
it's very clear to me. You know, I'm I sit on LinkedIn a bit and I look at stuff, and what I'm starting to feel, because I think a lot of people are sitting on LinkedIn, who are looking to start companies. I'm getting quite, I guess the best phrase is opinion fatigued, because everyone has got an opinion of what the new agency should look like, what the new frontier is, whether it's AI, it comes at you. It's like wave after wave after wave of opinion of how they see the industry or what the new trend will be. Um, I think that if you spend your life trying to build the company that other people are trying to predict, that actually you will end up not building the company that you want. I think you'll end up kind of engineering a company that satisfies like a and someone else's idea of what's going to work, and they may not be right at all. I mean, how do you predict where the industry is going? So if I had to do this all again, which I'm not going to,
Mhm.
and the immortal words of Roger Macon, who passed away recently, rest in peace, Roger. If at first you've succeeded, why try again? And he said those words when he said those words when he was invited to start another company, and they always rung true because I feel like I've done that now. But what I wouldn't do is look to the marketplace to tell me what kind of a company we should have. I think you'll end up being unsatisfied. You'll other people will build your company or the vision for your company. And I think that we've gone through that cycle of trying to build the perfect company or perfect agency with everything in it, with multiple um, skills and talents, and a one-stop kind of company. I think there's real value in small startups doing what they do passionately and doing that very, very well. Because I think that the bigger companies are getting weaker at what they're doing because there's just more and more things to do. Uh, whatever's in your soul and your heart as a young person, um, whether it's if you're a beautiful designer and you design incredible packaging, and go and do that. There's a place for that. Brands need that. Brands need everything. They may not need it from one company. And I think we're going to go through a cycle where clients and marketers are going to look to the best in breed um, um, agencies, and I think we're going to revert back to that model because there's real value in making something beautiful by people who are beautifully committed to doing that. So that's what I would stop doing, is letting the marketplace tell you how you should spend your life. Go back to basics and do what you want to do.
Interesting. Interesting. Greatest creative project of your life. What is this thing?
Yeah, I wish I could be less cryptic about it. today because we're in the final throes of finishing it off. It's an absolute gift to me as a creative person. It was the last idea conceptualized under the banner of King James. It literally a week before we became Accenture, we had this idea. We took it to Accenture. They thought it was amazing. David Droga said, "We have to do this. This is magnificent." And Accenture has been an absolute superstar in allowing us to use the best talent in Accenture around the world to create this project. I'm going to cryptically call it WGP, just because I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to reveal it ahead of time.
Okay.
But it's a real it's such a big thing in my life because it just happened to come at the end of this journey. The most satisfying, the most creatively ambitious project I've ever been involved in, and I think I'm going to be involved in it for many, many, many years to come. It's got me hook, line, and sinker, but it will be revealed soon to the world. Look out for it. I'm very grateful to Accenture for recognizing how beautiful it is, and I think it's going to take to the world a South African story that is worth telling, actually, and worth seeing and worth sharing. It's going to be it's a global film release on streaming platforms. It's games. It's a game. It's a platform. It's everything. It's the most complete job. And I used to call it my swan song until I saw on TV that the swan song is actually the last thing a swan sings before he dies. And then I thought, okay, I'm not going to refer to it as my swan song. I'm just going to refer to it as my greatest, most satisfying project ever.
Oh my goodness.
I'm not dead yet.
No, not anytime soon either. Not anytime soon either. I cannot wait to see this, and I'm sure I have no doubt, just like everything else that you've had the opportunity to touch and create, in your experience. I think I have no doubt that it's going to be really remarkable stuff. I'm looking forward to it, as well. All that we have of it right now is just WGP. Probably going to pull up Chat GPT and maybe.
No, don't do that.
I mean,
Don't jinx it. Leave it.
okay, all right. I'm going to leave it.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it. I'm excited for. I'm looking forward to it. And by all means, if there's anything that Diary of a CMO as a platform, can do in terms of supporting the work, by all means, I'll be open to having that conversation. Okay, now we're kind of getting into the last stretch of this. Oh boy, I am so happy. Oh, I'm so happy. Okay, I wanted to ask you again. I think it's very apt. I think it's a good question to ask you at this point of your career. You've kind of hinted on what you think in terms of like an outlook, for the future of the industry. I mean, one of the things you spoke about a few minutes ago was, the fact that brands need everything. And no matter how, you see a time where, no matter how small or you think this thing that you have a passion for doing is, brands need it. They might not need it from just you or just two of you, but, brands need it. But I'm staring toward asking you, what are some of the things that you were seeing in the industry, and how do you think that practitioners or professionals in the industry need to prepare for them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little terrified for the way the way the world's moving. Only because I think the advent of AI, which obviously can't ignore what it is. No one fully knows how it's going to change the world. But we get a sense it's going to.
Yeah.
But I think what bothers me a little bit is the relish I see in people's eyes when they talk about how AI is going to take your job. And they might be right. But don't be so cheerful about it. There's nothing joyful about
Right,
being
right,
being replaced by machinery. And quite frankly, if machinery can replace creative people, it can replace you. Whatever you do, it can do your job too. So, I think there's a need to just get some perspective. I saw a wonderful documentary recently, which kind of reminded me of how I feel about the world right now. Is that uh, John Williams? He's the very famous musician, score. He did all of Spielberg's films. There's a documentary called Music by John Williams. It's a wonderful showcase of how he created the scores for Jaws, Close Encounters, Indiana Jones, Schindler's List, you name it. There's a little segment in that film where they talk about how he scores every single film by hand. He sits there, he writes all the instruments for an entire orchestra by hand. He probably doesn't have to. He could probably bang it into a synthesizer, and it could bring up the score. And he could do it faster. He could do it more variations much quicker. But when he goes to record the score, he always involves a 64-piece orchestra, and those 64 people are all artists in their own right. Every instrument in an orchestra is a highly skilled individual who does nothing but perfects that. John Williams chooses to do that because what he's doing is he's acknowledging the people that make the music, and he's feeding it. He could go any other way. He could you could bang that music into AI and have a score.
right,
So I think that there's a sense of humanity that comes with that decision. And organizations that are choosing to fast track it because it's cheaper or faster or more convenient are missing the point. They're putting money, they're putting profits, they're putting everything ahead
right,
of humankind. And that's a problem
right.
for me. I know it's inevitable. There are people that want to do it faster, cheaper, but I don't know if I want to be a part of that world.
Yeah,
I would rather be a part of a world that still values the craft and the sense of connection that happens when 64 people play together, because that, I guess, is the very foundation of what culture is. It's 64 people built around a single thing and bringing it to life, and that very much for me is what I've enjoyed in my career, in my life as an agency leader. That is the most satisfying thing I've ever had in my life, is
wow,
that
wow,
orchestra of people
wow.
making something beautiful and respected and valued by people and clients. So, so as we head into this world, this new era, um, I suppose there are always faster, cheaper, quicker ways of doing stuff. The question is, do you want to? I mean, you as a human being, do you want to spend your life doing it that way? By all means, go ahead, do it if that's your choice. But it's personally not what makes me, what feeds my soul, and certainly not something I would like to spend a life in. So going forwards, I'm terrified for agency leaders because I think that they must make a choice. How do
Mm.
they want to spend their lives? It's painful to not do it the cheap, faster way, I guess.
Yeah,
Um, but I think, maybe when you're lying on your deathbed and you get to talk about your life and what made you happy, I'm not sure doing it faster, better, cheaper is really going to be top of your list.
wow, wow. That's amazing. Speaking of faster,
Mhm.
which is what you find with a lot of young, professionals today or entrepreneurs. What would you advise young, folks within the industry today? What would be the one advice you would give them, to guide them through their career within the industry? What would be that one advice you'd give?
I was always struck from a very young age that you gain respect faster, even as a copywriter, as a lone wolf creative writing a radio ad. The harder the job was to do, the more respect it garnishes. People admire people who 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 didn't do it faster, better, cheaper, who actually wrote something. I feel like to gain real respect, you kind of have to you kind of have to go through the pain of having to do something the hard way, whether it's as a creative person or as an agency person. I think the world reacts well to organizations that seem to do the right thing and to have done it painstakingly the hard way. I would always say to people, don't underestimate how valuable that is to what that gives you as a leader. You are growing in substance. You are getting respect of people. Again, I think that there's a level of impatience with young agencies. I think people, I'm not sure why what the rush is, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of articles recently prove beyond a doubt that it's probably better, rather than having 15 clients as an agency, you'd probably make more money if you only had 3. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
you're kind of caught in the cycle of building a company because you think that that's what companies should do. You think they should grow skills, and you think they should grow numbers, and your ego is fluffed up by the number of people you have and the client list you have.
Yeah.
But actually, there's real value in just getting 3 clients and doing that brilliantly with a smaller team. It might be less stressful. It might be more incredibly satisfying. I think you just need to question everything, question opinion, question thought leadership, because I think thought leadership will think you into the wrong place if you let it. Trust your own instincts of how it is you want to be as a person and as an entrepreneur, and have the patience to sort of see it through.
Wow.
Starting to sound like an Alan Gray ad.
When I talk to leaders in the industry, and I'm really grateful for the podcast because that's the opportunity it affords me. I was talking to Don Rowlands, and she was talking about some of her personal experience in the early days. Working as a waitress, losing a loved one and having to grow up really fast, and raising her sibling by herself, and how all of these things sort of formed the kind of human being she is today. Some of us are formed by more recent events than, as young people. Um, but I'm saying all of this to ask you, as we start to round this up, I think in the next 2 questions or so, what is one personal experience in your life's journey that has really shaped, or that had the most remarkable impact on your life and has really shaped the kind of person that you are today?
Sure, yeah. There's been a few
Mm,
kind of interesting
mm,
curveballs. I think that's kind of sort of focus you on what it is you want to do. I don't know how to put them in any hierarchy, but there were different phases of my life, as for sure. I think what's really happened more recently, which I think has led me to the decisions that I've made to where I am today, is really the birth of my daughter, Indy. So she's 11 years old now. I think that when I was a late starter, I won't tell you how I became a late starter, but once I had Indy and my wife Tabitha, it focused my life on where my priorities need to be, and as I sit here right now, because she is my priority. I need to see her through her teen years and beyond. So I think that is transformative in the sense that you eventually, even advertising is not your priority, and it always has been, sadly, for me. I've been perhaps so immersed in building King James and making ads that I have over the years lost perspective on a number of occasions. And if I keep going back, there's lots of little events that I think most certainly, I mentioned the start of, in fact, you mentioned it. When I started with Anu and we did that first album together, what I realized quite intrigued, which really intrigued me, was that when you open a door, when you go through that door, there's four more doors there. And then
Absolutely.
you open that door and there's four more doors beyond that. And actually,
Absolutely.
every incremental decision you make, if you don't make a decision, you'll stay within the same four doors and life will just go kind of be on repeat. But unless you're going branching sideways, you're pushing yourself into new territory, you won't find new doors. You won't
Yeah.
open things up.
Yeah.
And I looked up on many occasions and I thought, how did I get here? Well, I got here because we did that, and then we did that, and that opened up that door and that door. And so you do have to kind of you can't rest on what it is you're doing. And I guess just exploring as an entrepreneur is the best way to grow as an entrepreneur, because I now have the ideas I'm playing with now are vastly different to if I just stuck with being an ad agency person, for sure. Yeah, there's some other stuff I think might be too personal to share here, but yeah, it's
Right.
just
Right.
life's
Right.
like that. A
Right.
few curveballs here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I absolutely understand. Al. I mean, I I've had in my very short time in this world, I've had my set of curveballs at different times as well, and it's not all palatable for podcasts. But I do appreciate you being vulnerable enough and open to talk about your daughter. Um, I think that
Thank you.
it's going to be. I think that the impact she's had in your life, just based off what you're saying, I think that it's the ingredient that you need to make the kind of impact that you want to make in her life as well. And I have no doubts that that's going to happen. That's going to happen in every sense of the word.
I've got my my favorite T-shirt at the moment is um, simply says "Buckle up, we're going on a tangent,"
Wow!
and I absolutely love that phrase, because if I have
Wow!
to sum up my life, "Buckle up, we're going on a tangent" feels like the phrase that
Wow!
defines me,
Wow!
because tangents have been very very fulfilling and very rewarding for me as a person. But I suppose that's the definition of a creative mind. I think
Yeah.
if you're not on a tangent all the time,
Mm.
um, you can't be creative enough. So that's
Wow!
become my motto.
Wow! Wow! It's amazing. And this my final question here is as you sort of start to a large extent wind down your active participation in the advertising industry as we know it, and if legacy means anything to you, what kind of legacy would you like to leave behind in the industry?
Yeah, this is a very fascinating subject for me. I mean, I started to think about legacy quite some time ago, and I had a very good friend. His name was Robin Putt. I don't know if you've heard of him. He was the chief creative officer of Ogilvy and Mather, right, for Saul Trip and Macon, which became Ogilvy and Mather.
Right.
And he and I were very, very, very close, very good friends after I started King James, and we continued to remain friends. But he sadly passed away. He became very famous, by the way. He left South Africa. He became the global creative director for Ogilvy and Mather. He became the global creative director for WPP. He got to the very, very highest um, office that a South African has ever been to, really. And when he passed away, I was invited to come to Johannesburg to talk about at the Creative Circle Ad of the Year, to pay tribute to him. And I arrived and I walked onto stage, and it was a very emotional moment for me. And I started to talk about Robin, and all I heard was noise. I could hear noise and laughter and cheering, and I kind of looked underneath the lights, And there were people doing tequila and shaking and chatting to each other. Um, and I lost my cool a bit, and I shouted. I went, "Hello!" And the room went quiet. And I said, um, "How many of you have heard of Robin Potter? Raise your hand." And a few people raised their hands, but probably 10% of the room. Um, and this is a man that had been out of the South African ad industry for only 5 years. And it occurred to me in that moment that there's such great turnover in the ad industry that the 90% that had never heard of him were all new to the industry in the past 4 or 5 years. Young people who were there for a good job. They didn't know who Robin Potter was. The legacy of his work didn't matter to them in that moment. And it made me realize that legacy is such a strange thing to try to hold on to, because you're so easily forgotten. I mean, why should you be remembered? Why? Who's going to, every time someone my age leaves the industry, there's one person one person less who remembers what I did. And every new person that joins may hear of King James, but they don't know. They think of the Bible, as you pointed out at the beginning. So what's the point? What's the point of sort of attaching huge value to your legacy? I think that, as I sit here right now, I think having enjoyed 37 years of making ads and being proud of the work and nothing has given me more thrill in life than sitting at a party and you can hear people talking about something that you made. That is my legacy, is to have done work that actually was worth noticing and worth talking about, and that's what makes me proud. I mean, the name King James, it's gone. It's no longer important, I guess, and I've actually let it go myself. So I don't know what my legacy is, because I think it's always based on the present, I guess. Whatever I can do today is really the most I can do in life, and everything else fades very fast. And I think that's quite a healthy thing, because I don't want to be that guy that's sitting on Facebook or LinkedIn reminding the world of the work that I did 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I don't want to keep posting my achievements, because they've kind of gone and they've become less important over time.
Hmm. Wow. To be honest with you, I haven't heard someone speak of legacy in the way that you just did. When I think about legacy, and I must apologize that I, in my question, sort of limited it to the industry, because when I think about legacy, even when it comes to the things I do in the industry, I've got 3 kids, and I do know that I might not. I don't know how much time I have. I want to be here for as long as possible. I don't know how much time I have, but So when I think about legacy, I think about how much of me can I leave in whatever format, whether it's in a book, whether it's in a podcast, whether it's in a piece of work I did or creative I executed, in whatever format can I leave behind, so that my kids, regardless of what happens to me, get an almost exhaustible idea of what their father was like, or when their kids are here, of what their grandfather was like.
Yeah.
Because I think that becomes even more important on that level, so when I think about legacy, I think about legacy from that point of view, as to how much of me can I leave behind for my kids and their kids, and so on and so forth, in whatever format it is, whether it's the work I did,
Yeah.
whether it's the community I served, whether it's in a book, whether it's in a podcast. how much of me can I leave behind for my generation to be able to see? Hopefully, even if the world doesn't care, hopefully my children care. Hopefully my children's children care, and so on and so forth. That's kind of
Yeah.
how I think about legacy. And I think that it's a very healthy and, less pressuring way to think about legacy.
No, I mean, your answer in many ways was a better answer than mine, because I suppose when you've spent 37 years in advertising trying to get to this point, it becomes all encompassing, and therein lies the problem. I think that, I mean, I do now. I think legacy is probably lots of things rather than one thing. I mean,
Mm, mm,
I absolutely, like you, have a book in my head, and I would like to write that book, and I'd like to see if I'm vaguely anywhere close to being the writer that I think I might be. But knowing how damn hard it is to write, I have untold respect for people that actually sit down and get a book out of themselves. But I would love to try that, and that too might become legacy or not. It might
yeah,
damage my legacy.
yeah,
But
yeah,
all of those things, legacy is a lot of different things. It surely can't be one thing, and
yeah,
and and
yeah.
that's why your answer is much better than mine, because I kind of zeroed in on the one thing that I'm known for. But maybe that's also a lesson.
Wow, thank you so much, Al. Oh my goodness. Wow. This has been oh man, this has been everything I imagined it would be. Um we said at the beginning of the pod, or before we started recording, we were saying or joking about the fact that we hope that the podcast would be worth all of the
The build-up.
rescheduling and scheduling and all of that.
Hmm.
And I think it's been worth it. I most importantly, I deeply want to say thank you for choosing to talk about some of these things that require a certain level of vulnerability to talk about, especially on a public platform. Number two, I also want to thank you for talking about, this greatest creative project of your life, and at least in the most cryptic, sense of it. But at least you spoke about it to some extent. I also like that you talked about things I would consider, your insecurities, and I think, it's not, especially, forgive me, this is the African man in me about to speak, especially as men that we are, it's not usually the easiest thing to talk about. And of course, being able to talk about all of the beautiful things that, King James Group has done. I think that, um, it's there is a scripture, in the Holy Bible that talks about, and I'm saying this to the point you were making about the name King James Group is gone. And the scripture talks about God's commandments be written, in our hearts. It's not on any
Hmm.
lampposts. It's not on any business card. It's not on, on any website anywhere. But the King James story, and I'm speaking for myself, and I think that to a large extent to for some people as well, the King James story um, will live on in the hearts of people who had the opportunity to come in contact with that story, whether within Johannesburg or within South Africa there, or further up north of South Africa in Nigeria, or across the rest of the world, for everyone who at some point had the opportunity to encounter, that brand and that name, whether as a corporate brand or through the body of work that you did. A lot of your creative work features on the slides of a lot of agencies and a lot of brands. And I'm saying that because I am one of those people who have put your work on a slide in a presentation to say, this is the kind of work we should be doing as agency and client partners. Do you get what I mean? I'm saying
Yeah.
this to say that, the name as a corporate entity might not be here anymore. but those that story lives in the heart of a lot of people, and whether you are here or you are no longer here, that would be the case to a large extent, and it will take time for it to be completely, forgotten. It will take a long time. I promise you, it will take a long time. Some people would even encounter it and not know that this is the King James story. Do you get what I mean? Whether based on something that they see, or a
Yeah.
creative director that was inspired by you and your work, or it would live on in the hearts of a lot of people. And I think I want you to take a bit of comfort, as small as that comfort could be, a bit of comfort in knowing that there will be a group of people, and I dare say a lot of people, that your work and everything that King James represents will continue to touch for a very, very long time.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. Yeah, and that fills my heart. That's kind of, I think that's all you can hope to do in life, is to do something that people look up to, and that's
Yeah,
I guess the very foundation of reputation is having people admire what you do in your life, and have come out of that satisfied. I mean, I wish nothing but the best for Accenture Song going forward, because I think that story, King James, lives inside that organization. They're
absolutely,
going to keep evolving. They're going to keep
absolutely,
doing great work.
absolutely,
They're behind this piece of work that I can proudly say is the greatest piece of work in my life. And
absolutely,
I will forever be grateful for that. And
absolutely.
I have no regrets as to the choices I've made, because I think that they were necessary and exciting for the people that remain in the company. And it's my journey is my journey, and that company will have its own journey. So I appreciate the chance to tell my story from beginning to end,
Yeah.
and I've never had the chance to do that, actually,
Wow.
quite in the same way.
Wow. Wow.
So
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you, Al, for doing this. It took very long to get this done. No fault of anyone. Life happens. But I'm glad that we finally did. And I have no doubt that a lot of people who listen to this will find this as meaningful as I have found it. I have no doubt about that. Any final words for those listening, or maybe even for me?
Well, I think what you're doing is extraordinary, because you're sharing people's stories, and I think you're doing it so beautifully. To create content for Africa, for me, is so necessary, because we look to the rest of the world for our thrills, and I think that the African way is much more personal. The way you're making it, um, and I just think you're doing an extraordinary job, and no doubt going to continue to conquer whatever you do. So thank you for the time that you've given me as well,
Thank you very much, Al.
and we'll
Thank you.
cross paths again.
For sure we will.
Okay,
For sure we will. For sure we will.
thank you.
And that's all for today, guys. Thank you so much. Oh boy, it's been an incredible ride. It's been an incredible conversation. I feel I am full, and I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to do this. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and see you at work.
Thank you.